episode of DailyFlip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story talking about the stranglehold that the U.S. government, but also mainly Donald Trump, has over the chips industry currently. We're, of course, going to dive into a whole bunch of aspects of it: the business, the government, Trump's personality. But with that, we're also going to end today with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. Hey, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump into our daily debate. So, we had a CHIPS Act that absolutely changed the dynamic of how we approach this extremely important technology moving into the next decade. And now we have a president who's more pro-chip and more pro-growth and more pro-AI, as long as it's in the United States. Do you think this is enough of a policy alignment between the two administrations that it could actually benefit these industries? The New York Times, where this article comes from, makes a few different arguments about stability, and I think they have a point, though I wonder, does that policy continuity between the two allow for enough alignment in your mind to actually be a beneficial policy and one that propels us into the future with this new technology? I'm interested. Throw your comments down in the comment section. It's a little bit more of a thinky one than normal, but hey, you don't come here for just the jokes, mainly because there aren't that many. So the article, like I said, comes from the New York Times. The headline reads, "Trump has made himself commander-in-chief of the chip industry." And as a executive who loves to be more involved, especially this time around in the economy, in the tariff policy arena, Trump has put himself as the linchpin. Now, to be fair, he is the president of the United States, so to some degree he's inherently a linchpin, though Trump has definitely intervened more than most. This quote at the very beginning highlights this. Quote, Mr. Trump said there would be a price for granting Nvidia licenses. It needed to sell artificial intelligence chips to China. I want 20%, Mr. Trump said. Will you make it 15, Mr. Huang said. Now, if you don't know who Mr. Huang is, Huang, I believe is how you pronounce his name. I could be absolutely screwing it up. He is the executive, the president, the leader currently of Nvidia, one of the largest GPU slash tech slash chip manufacturers and designers. And let's be clear, it's a little bit less clear than that. They're not TSMC. They're not CPU processor creators. They are basically a GPU specialty company, and that's not to degrade them. They sell more than that. I mean, if you look online, one of the supercomputers that they made for AI modeling, only like $250 or so, is another huge product they released 7 months ago. So they have lots of multifaceted business plans. They're more than just a GPU maker, but they're famous for their GPUs. And considering the amount of GPU usage that some of these supercomputers use that are being built for AI, that's why they've come into prominence. So why does Mr. Trump want to take this money off the top, besides the fact that, he makes some money off of the deal? And I say he, I mean the U.S. government. It's because inherently Trump's perspective has always been, do it in America. Don't try to export your technology to other places. Don't allow this cutting edge tech to go to other places. Now, Mr. Huang's argument would be, as he states multiple times in here, it's actually not the top line of the chip. It's a little bit of a mid-tier chip. The whole point in his mind is to be able to sell there, but also ensure, and he said this in an interview at one of the tech conferences, talking about DeepSeek and all these different Chinese models, how they are built on Western infrastructure, how they're built on some of the chips that we produce, though, of course, they have their own chips there in China, especially after the CHIPS Act and some of the restrictions that Biden put on producers from sending critical materials that would actually allow for more advanced chip making in China and restricting them. After Biden said, hey, you're not allowed to go to China anymore, you're not allowed to sell there unless, if you deal with us, you're going to get cut off if you sell to them. They have a resurgence in China of their own chip making fabrications now, or they've to the same level as any of the ones in Taiwan or the ones we're trying to build here. Not quite, at least from what we can understand. But point overall being that when Juan's saying that it's built on Western infrastructure, it's not just that, it's on the code, it's on the similar models that we have used for AI. They've actually kind of co-opted some, in his mind, they've co-opted some of the codes and the techniques, not necessarily industrial sabotage, but they're taking from us. And if we're able to embed ourselves even further into the infrastructure, if an American company is sending them the material, is sending them the necessary products, and China is not making them, that's actually a strategical advantage, which is a very interesting point. And I think it's another leverage point that he had with Donald Trump, which is saying, you know, how we're dependent on cheap manufacturing in China. Well, what if they were actually dependent on our manufacturing of the critical infrastructure that goes into this next AI race, which we're trying to win with them? And that gave Nvidia a little bit of leverage in that case. Let's be clear, I'm not privy to the negotiations, but I have heard this man speak before, and I know how he's thinking about this issue. And the fact that Donald Trump still came back and said, no, you're not allowed. He wants to be intricately involved. Goodness gracious. He wants to be involved in every single step of this. He wants to be the person making the decisions. He wants the one being able to take a little bit off the top of the deal. He wants a finder's fee in some cases. However you want to put it. This is actually detrimental to the U.S. economy. And why does that matter? Why would it be detrimental? Well, let me read this quote for you. And let's be clear, quotes don't necessarily elucidate a point, but I think they help show the edges of this point. And we'll get into the specific one afterwards. Quote, but with Mr. Trump in charge, companies don't know when they may be pressured to change their business plans, said Jimmy Goodrich, a senior advisor at the Rand Corporation. Quote, the whole thing is a roller coaster ride, Mr. Goodrich said. It's up and it's down, and who knows what direction, because Trump is dealing with these issues as they come, end quote. Why is that important, Alex? Why do we care? Well, economic stability. If Nvidia had plans to grow in this market segment, make it cheaper or at least less advanced set of GPU chips that they're selling to China, and they're spending millions on market analytics. They're trying to figure out what China needs when they're actually spending millions of dollars to make these chipsets, to understand what the infrastructure needs are, to understand where they can expand in China. That's amount of money that goes down the drain the second Donald Trump says, hey, you're not allowed, you're not going to get these licenses to send over there. That is money that is wasted. If there was at least a stable policy, if Donald Trump said, actually, you know what, hey, you are not allowed to do it, period, full stop. We're not going to grant you the licenses. We're not going to change anything. Then they wouldn't even invest that money to do it in the first place. Stability breeds predictability, and predictability breeds business decisions that are optimized. It doesn't mean that they're the best for the company, but they're the best that the company can do with its current situations, which means capital isn't wasted. And in this case, it seems that Nvidia did the math and said, hey, that 15% on top, we can handle that. But not every company is big enough to do that. Not every company is big enough to donate. And let's be clear, I'm not saying they did donate, but in theory, a lot of their employees, their executives, they could donate to a PAC and have some sort of influence. They don't have the ability to get in the room with Donald Trump and tell them his reasoning. And even then, it shouldn't be based off of their reasoning, because then that just means it's an access game. It should be that he himself is stable. He himself has a coherent ideology, and it allows for predictability in that role. I know we've talked about it many times, but once again, this is another article, another elucidation of why he is unstable, what needs to change, and how at this point now it's affecting one of the largest companies that is actually bringing innovation into the U.S. market and is also on the cutting edge of what is possible, and making sure that we are on top as the United States of America moving forward. And maybe Juan's statements are, absolute baloney. Maybe he's just saying it for people like me who want to hear the fact that China is building on our infrastructure, that we want them reliant. And it puts him in a position that inherently shows and implies that he is extremely valuable. It could be totally possible. But I think he's got something there. I think I actually said it in a podcast a long time ago when the initial restrictions came out, which is, while I agree that we shouldn't give China the ability to simply access the highest end of things in the chip market by restricting them from it, by actually telling companies they're not allowed to interact there, by telling China they're not allowed to have this technology, are we not just cultivating that market in a full market deployment by a government that can literally tell companies where they need to put their money? Are we not cultivating that mentality of, we'll go and do it ourselves? So, once again, we'll see how it all pans out. But whether or not I think that it's the right way to deal with China, I can tell you now, the executive that's doing it is doing it in a ham-fisted, really, really involved way, which I don't really love an executive being involved in the economy. But hey, maybe that's just me. Maybe the president should be directly involved. Maybe, you know what? Actually, I take that back. I'm going to build a business one day. I don't know what it will be, but I'm going to build a business one day. And then I am going to go by the mandate of the president. But with that, let's get to something a little bit lighter. Today we have a video from Dog Time. Grandpa goes above and beyond to ensure dog lives his best life. And Grandpa takes the dog out into the pool. He has little cuddle sessions when he's trying to sleep. Honestly, this dog is absolutely adorable. And if you want to see photos of him, you want to read about him, or you want to read the New York Times article in its entirety, you can find the links in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at your DailyFlip. Also, if you want to follow that, you get links to these episodes that come out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you get the links to the international show 6 and 6 that comes out on Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die,